I used to always say I didn't have a green thumb.
A green thumb? You talking about like planting?
Yeah, making things grow.
Okay.
But the best things grow underneath the ground, which requires deep roots.
Yes.
And so what we're going to talk about today is getting to the root of why we do what we do, why we believe what we believe, and why do we treat people the way we do.
That's coming up next on this episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee.
Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil
and Renee, where amazing things happen. Our goal is to help build, repair, and restore healthy relationships.
Our primary focus is on the marriage relationship. However, the topics are applicable to the relationships that we value most. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.
Being in the work that I do on a regular basis, anytime we have a customer or we start out with a problem, for those who may not be familiar, I work with computers. I'm in IT. And one of the things the very first thing they teach you when you first start in this field is when you're doing troubleshooting is always try to find what is the root cause of the problem. Because if not, you'll find yourself spending hours and hours and hours doing some deep stuff, and it'll end up being
the plug is uncorked.
Or you may have heard somebody say, turn it off, turn it back on. And you'll go through and do all these different configurations. You'll dig into the BIOS on the computer, and you'll start thinking, we tend to go to the extreme first and not the basic things. And that just made me think about when you talked about planting and plants and roots and things like that. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight as far as the root of things. And I think this is going to be an interesting topic.
Yeah, I do. I think it's a very overlooked area of growing and changing. Mm-hmm. And I think that just like with most other things, when you don't know where to start, you end up starting in places that really take you around in a circle.
Right. And if you hear some noise in the background, we're
in Richie.
We're actually on the road as we are recording this right now. We're in Louisiana right now en route to our next destination. So
you guys are going to have to bear with us and get used to some different sounds.
Yeah, because we're pretty close to the highway and you can hear some. So we're apologizing in advance in case you hear some crazy noises like motorcycles and big trucks. I'm going to try to filter it all
another
out.
Layer of just adding some fun
some realism
to our episode.
This is real, y'all. We are actually really, really on the road.
We're in Richie.
So we're actually going to try to do the best we can to clean it up. But we're not going to take that away from what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to talk about getting to the root. And one of the scriptures that I love, it says, lean not on your own, Proverbs 3:5-9, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge God, and He will direct your path. And I think it's just like what you're talking about. You have to have an order for how you do things.
Right.
And I think there's 3 questions through the process of getting to the root of things that we should begin to ask ourselves. And this is not like a theory or it's just something that I have kind of learned to do. Mm-hmm. And it's the first question is to ask yourself, why did I do that?
And that kind of goes into the self-examination thing we're always talking about, because if you don't sit back and talk, not necessarily talk to yourself, but if you don't take a time to really examine some of the inner things that you think about or say, or things that you set up in your heart and in your mind, that is something that can come at a big cost later on.
Yeah, because the question, you notice I didn't say, why did they do that? Because I think it's important that we understand that everything with us starts with us.
Right.
So that first question is, why did I do that? The second question is, who told me that? Mm-hmm. Our belief systems, your theology or the lack thereof is going to impact your outcome, the way you do things. So your belief system is going to dictate the lens in which you see things through. So that's the second question. And then the third question is, how do I make the people that I love feel? Mm-hmm. Because again, when you're making decisions, when you're going through things, it doesn't just affect you. It affects all the people in your sphere of influence. We were talking during the interview. It affects the cat, the dog, the neighbors, the trees, the trash, the environment. Everything is affected by the decisions we make. So if we begin to ask ourselves those questions, it'll kind of help us, one, to calm down. And I would really even begin to challenge you, because you guys know you may not know it, but on February the 2nd, we're releasing the workbook for the Rich Relationship Refuge Oneness Code Workbook. And this book is going to get y'all to write. We need to write things down, and it'll really help us to process. Because when you stop and take the time to write things down, it really helps you to calm yourself down so that you're not being reactionary, you're not in your feelings, you're not being impulsive. And so these are some of the things that will kind of really help you to not keep having, not chasing symptoms like you talked about. It's as simple as, before you do anything, make sure that your computer is plugged in. And if you're trying to plan a plant, I think something that, this week we were talking, you and I were talking, and one of the things the Lord showed me was that faith is like a stock. It's not like a scratch ticket. It takes time. And so for something to grow, there's going to be a lot of time when it's under the ground and you're not going to see anything. And so just like when we're waiting for something to grow, there's things that are going on under the ground. In our hearts, there are things that are going on underneath the ground, the things we don't talk about, the things we don't say. And if we don't learn how to really unpack and think about, well, why did I do that? And who told me that? And if we begin to ask ourselves those questions, it'll really help us to get into a healthy place of knowing how to let go, when to let go, and to how to make some course corrections in our own emotions.
And before we actually dive a little bit more into the 3 areas, why don't you talk a little bit about the actual workbook? I know it's going to be released, but why don't you tell the listeners who may not be familiar with the Rich Relationship, Our Marital Code of Oneness, the actual book that we released last year. This is the follow-up to that. Why don't you give them a little more insight into the why behind the workbook?
Well, after, we worked with couples for 15 years. And last year we did an anthology with 17 other co-authors. And I thought it was beautiful to have people share their stories. But just like when I did the 21-Day Journey Cookbook, and then I wrote Freedom from Food, because a lot of times we give people how, but we don't get to the why. And I'm really big on, if you understand why, it will eliminate some of your hows. And so the workbook was really designed to help people not just read the stories and be like, oh, those are nice stories. Because a lot of people, they bought the book, they got the book, and thank you guys. I appreciate you guys going and getting Rich Relationships, Our Marital Code of Oneness. But I also want you to understand that it's not just getting the book, it's doing the work. And so I thought, well, why not have a workbook? So that then that way it's not just about reading it, because I think reading someone else's story, people feel like, well, it's your story, I don't care. But it's helping you to write your story.
Well, because I think when you read other people's story, that gives you the background into the just like me factor. Because there's nothing new under the sun, like the Bible always says. Mm-hmm. And we go through things as individuals, but also as a couple, a married couple, that sometimes you feel like it's just me.
Yeah, you feel like you're unique.
Right.
Your situation is unique.
Or we're just going through this and nobody else. But when you read that book and you read some of the other stories and some of the things, the tools, that's what's really important. There are tools there that you can glean from, that you can take and say, you know what? This is how they got through it. It may not be identical, but it's things and traits and principles there that you can grab onto and maybe come up with your own solution to get to the root of your issue.
Yeah, because I think it's important that because one of the things for us, we're really big on tools, community, and accountability. Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's important that when people get the tools, that they have a plan of action to practice them. Right. And the Bible says, write the vision down and make a plan so that they that run can run with clarity. And so if there's something you're trying to work on or an area of your heart that you're trying to change, you can't just pick all the leaves off the tree. You can't just deal with the symptoms. You have to really learn how to really ask yourself some really hard questions. And the workbook is really designed. It's based on the things we wrote for the book.
Right.
The code,
mm-hmm.
and it's really designed to make us look inward and ask ourselves some questions like, what are your core values?
Right.
Who are your values serving? So these are the kind of questions that are in the workbook, because I think it's important that when we take the time to ask ourselves those questions, when we're in a situation with another individual, we have those answers for ourselves. And those are things we need to know about us.
If you listen to the show, you will realize that a lot of the material or content that's actually in the book not in the workbook. You can see, so a lot of the content that's actually in the book is from podcast episodes that we did. And like you were saying, it wasn't a master plan or anything that we did.
It's just that we just took little steps of obedience. And when you go back and look at it all together, how cohesive it is, it had to be the genius of God for that. And so for those of you who are struggling to get started or to take steps, if you take one step at a time towards whatever goal or whatever decision you're trying to make, it's going to produce fruit. But just remember, just like we're talking about getting to the root, change and growth and progress, it takes time. And we have to be patient with the process, and we have to be willing to water. You know, the Bible says one plants, one waters, but only God can give the increase. And so I think another part of getting to the root is understanding why we are so worried about the results. You know, why are we so concerned about the outcome? And so I think that if we would spend more time asking ourselves difficult questions, it would keep us from doing things without thinking about it and without making decisions that we're going to regret later on.
Right. And so based on that, this is what the topic we're actually talking about is talking about decisions. It kind of goes into decisions, but talking about the root of things when it pertains to the individual and the relationships that you actually have.
Yeah, because the Bible talks about how our heart is exceedingly wicked above all things. And so I think a part of it is that we have to, when people say, oh, God knows my heart. But yeah, God knows your heart. But do you know your heart? Because I think so many times we have this, we talked about it before, we can sell ourselves on anything. So in other words, we're good at lying to ourselves. And that's because a lot of times we don't have checks and balances. We don't think about our values. We don't think about our goals. We don't, it's the beginning of the year and everyone's doing the Daniel and everyone's fasting and everyone's working out. And that's good. However, if you don't plan for this to be a lifestyle, it'll be January again and you'll be starting again. And so I think a part of getting to the root is, because I remember asking myself, well, why do I have to always be on a diet versus trying to find a new diet? Well, what am I doing that's causing me to have to be on a diet? And I think that's when I really begin to understand why. So I think the more we ask ourselves why, and what I love about what you said is when you read something, you just keep asking yourself why until there's no more whys.
It's like digging a hole. You just keep why. And it can get very frustrating when you ask yourself why until you get to the point where you're like, well, I don't know. Well, you do know.
Yeah.
And it just requires you to just do some thinking.
And it requires discipline, it's a mental and spiritual discipline to stop and ask yourself, well, why do I have to have that? Or why do I have to do that?
And the point I was going to make in honesty.
Yeah.
You got to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I say it multiple times, honest with yourself. And even just recently, I had to be honest with myself about some things in my own personal life that sometimes you don't like looking in the mirror. You don't like looking in the mirror. And when you get to those whys and you get a response that you may not even realize was there, or you have denied or neglected or ignored for a long time until you get to a point where you just have to admit it. Yeah. Because you can't get free from something, you can't move forward with something or someone until you just own it.
Yeah, because I think about like with me and my food addiction, I think that as long as I thought that the solution was I needed to go on a diet, I wasn't really dealing with that was a symptom. Mm-hmm. Rather than saying, oh, I just need to go on a diet, it's like, no, well, what about what's going on with my relationship with food? Why is food the center of everything that I do? It's the first thing I think about. The last, it's like, wait a minute, this might not have the right place in my heart. And so I'm a real big advocate of knowing why you do what you do, understanding that everything is connected. And if you feel angry and you want to shop, or if you feel angry and you want to drink, or if you feel angry and you want to eat, you need to get to why you do things the way you do.
And those things can have a big impact on your relationships. I know this is a little bit not off kilter of what we normally talk about with our marriage relationships, but this goes into every area and every relationship in your life that you actually can have. And the first one starts with you. And so that's what we're talking about on this episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee. We're talking about the root.
Getting to the root.
Get to the root of the things.
Yeah. And I think one of the tools that you could use to get to the root is empathy. You know, I think if you talked about digging a hole, if I was going to try to get to the root of something, be gentle with yourself. Give yourself some grace and understanding that if there's something you have been doing for 15 or 20 years, it's not going to change overnight. change that is permanent is slow and gradual. It's better to make one change at a time and master that one change versus making 20 changes. And if you make too many changes at one time, you're not going to really know what works. And so getting a part of the process of getting to the root of thing is basically having a system that you use and being consistent and having some place to write it down. Because one of the things that I really love about the beginning of the book is that the beginning questions, because this is not just for married people, because I think so many times people hear rich relationships and they think that it's just for marriage, but you're single before you're married.
Right. Everybody.
And everyone is like, hey guys, guess what? We were all single. And so we have that in common. And so I think a part of it is thinking about the individual, because one of the things it says on the back of the book is that if you suck at being single, you will suck at being married.
Now, I've heard you quote that and you've said it on the show before. Why don't you tell people a little bit about what you mean by that?
Well, the habits that you have, you play like you practice. So if you don't have good communication, you don't have a good sense of your identity, you don't have good communication skills as far as conflict resolution, you're not a good listener, getting married isn't going to change that.
It's going to actually amplify it.
It is, because marriage is the highest level of service. Ladies and gentlemen, marriage is not where you go to get your needs met. That is why you get saved. Marriage is where you go to serve another human being and God. It's not about you getting served. It's about you serving. And I think that if we explain that more and we help people to do the work of really getting to their why and understanding your beliefs and your values and, your temperament. Your temperament plays a big part in how you react to things. And so those are things you need to know about yourself, because if you do that, if you do the heavy lifting when it's just you by yourself, when you get into a relationship with another person, and I love that you always say this, and I didn't really get it. It's like when you say I'm light, it's because I'm always digging in my hole trying to get my roots together.
And for those who may not be familiar with it, that quote came from, we were doing an interview
with Babby Mason
on a show, and they were asking me a question about Renee, and that was one thing, how I described her as being light, not as in weight wise, but as in heavy. You can be around some people and it's just weighty and heavy.
Well, I think I am heavy as far as the way I
not
think.
Not to me in the sense of, when I say, just like on the show, when I said light, is you have an identity, you know who you are, what you're doing, what you want to do, what you want to achieve, and therefore that doesn't put weight on me.
Exactly.
If I had to communicate that, when I say you're light, that means the insecurities and things that are deficiencies in you don't put that on me. You've done years of self-examination, and we're all under construction, like we like to say.
And we will be until we leave here.
And we're still going to be working on things, and you're still working on things. And do you get everything right? Absolutely
no.
not. Do I or anybody else? But you are acutely aware of the things that you do need to work on, and you understand, and I give you grace and you give me grace to have time to work on those things. Mm-hmm. So we try to make each other light in the sense of not putting the onus of deficiencies, insecurities, and things that I am working on you to validate, fulfill, and achieve on my behalf.
Exactly.
You can't do that.
No. Well, you can do it. It's just it won't be very productive.
No, and it's impossible, because the only one that can fulfill all those things is God.
It's God.
And if you try to put that weight on someone else, you're going to be sorely disappointed in the long run.
You know what I love? I remember being told a story. When we were growing up, they had the brown paper bags, and each of the bags, they were each a different size. Like, let's say one of them would hold a half a pound and another one hold 3 pounds, and a big
like penny store bag.
The penny store bags.
Or
like
the grocery bag.
Yeah. And so if you're trying to put a grocery size load in a penny candy bag, it's going to rip.
You used to walk home from school or whatever.
And that bag would bust open. All your non-ladies would fall over the ground. You'd be like, no! So we can't put a grocery size load into a penny candy bag. We are all penny candy bags. So we have to be willing to take our loads daily, because the Bible says, cast your cares upon the Lord, because he cares for you. And because he didn't design us to carry that. We're supposed to daily go to him. And another part of the getting to the root is having a place to take all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that's another part of when we talked about your beliefs. Your beliefs, we're not saying you have to believe what we believe. We're just saying that you need to have a belief system, because without a belief system, you don't have a way to distribute or disperse or dispose of the things that are beyond your capacity.
And you're going to be using your own standard as your measurement of success and failure and those types of things. Because if you don't have something bigger than yourself, then you may be a little bit off in the thinking and the behavior of some of the things that you may be doing. But as we going into this, we've been talking about the root of things, and I wanted you to touch a little bit on, I like the statement, and it's so true. And you said it at this beginning. We already talked about, why did I do that and how you make other people feel. But I like the topic of who told you that.
Yeah, I love that you always say that.
Because it resonates with me, because when you say who told you that, that instantly makes you challenge in not only doing your own thinking and what you're thinking about and what you're doing, it makes you challenge what you were told.
The source of the information.
Yeah. And there's a term going on right now, fake news or misinformation. That's nothing new. It's been going on forever. But we need to challenge, not only if you're watching a news program or wherever you get your source of information from. That's what I'm really talking about. Where are you getting your source of information for the principles and the character things that you have applied or trying to apply in your life, to say, who told you that and where did you get it from? Because if you have a faulty source, then guess what? The information is faulty and the application is going to be faulty.
Unfortunately, if you're not constantly checking it against something, you're going to get further and further and further and further off. So it's important that we make sure that the people that we're getting our information from, the people that we're following, the people that are leading us are
credible,
honest, and that they're practicing what they're telling you. Because I think a big part of it, even I was talking to someone today, we were talking about the whole author world. And I said, it's very sticky and grimy because people are motivated to make money. And so I said, you have to look at their results. Someone can't take you where they've not been. And so I think that even with the episodes, how do you guys come up with, over a year of episodes? Keep living life.
That's all you got to do, and be willing to talk about it
and share it.
We have these kind of conversations all the time between ourselves. All we're doing is letting everybody eavesdrop.
Come hang out with us,
That's
y'all.
all we doing, y'all. We just hitting the record button on the device and letting y'all hear what we're talking about, because
it's not that easy, because you have to have an outline and we got to prepare. Right now, so it's not just the conversation. There is work, but it starts we enjoy
with a conversation. It starts with a conversation, and once we have the conversation, and then all the structure comes, because we want to present something well outlined and something easy to follow and something that you can get our train of thought on what we're talking about, because that is just as important. You're great at freestyle. I like to process things, and that's okay.
Yeah. And the thing is that the beauty of it is that my weakness is your strengths and your strengths are my weaknesses, and we embrace them both.
Right.
And a part of getting to the root of things is knowing yourself well enough to know that I don't have to change you to make me feel good, and I don't have to tear you down to make me feel good. Because if I am enough all alone because of my relationship with God, I can go into relationships and in rooms and bring value and speak life and encourage. But we got to take the time to get to know us, our growth areas, our strengths, our likes, our dislikes. And I think because we got married so young, there was so much about me I didn't know.
Well, we were growing with each other at the same time of actually trying to father children and mother children that we had at an early age. I think back to that, we were talking about it earlier. We were 23 when we had kids. And so I think about 23. Oh my gosh.
I look at,
I was so clueless at 23. I'm surprised. Oh my God. I just have to apologize right now.
But we repent. We did the best we knew how to do. And we did it with the right motive, and we did it with the right heart. And that's the thing, is that when you are a person that you try to do things with the right motives, God will fill in all the blanks. He'll take care of that.
And that kind of sums up the last point that we'll make tonight on this episode is, how do you make the people around you feel.
Yeah.
It should be always your intention to make them better.
And the reason why I said the people that love you, because most people are very nice to strangers. They're very nice to strangers. They're nice to their pastor. They're nice to people. Because I know for me, because I
everyday life, walk of life at the grocery store, meeting in a casual environment.
But how do you make the people that love you?
That have invested in time.
One person in public and another person in private. It's so important that it's cohesive, because the root is really your character. It's your beliefs. It's your goals. I said, so it's so very important that we focus on that and we think about not just how we treat strangers. But see, now in our generation, that's how it was. But now people are just mean to everybody. Just across the board.
If you want to know that, just watch your local news.
Yeah. Yeah. So we just have to be, in this time, in this day, we have to really stick to and be rooted and grounded. It's so important to have a foundation. If you guys look at the graphic this week, I picked this huge tree with these big roots. And so just know that in order to become a big sequoia tree, it's going to take some time and some work and years of cultivating. So be patient with yourself. Get to your root and be patient with your roots, because that's what's going to make us unshakable and help us to grow and leave a legacy for the next generation.
So we have come up with something. It was a little bit different, y'all. We understand that, but this is just something that we wanted to just talk and share with you guys about. It's a little bit different. That's all I'm going to say about it. So hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you guys next week.
Yes. And remember,
we're stronger together.
Let's grow.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your investment in time. Remember to subscribe to the show and hit the notification icon to be notified when new episodes are posted on the podcast platform that you're listening from.
Or you can always find us on our website at richrelationshipsus.com or our YouTube channel, Rich Relationships with Gil and Renee. If you found this podcast helpful or you think it could help someone that you know and care about, please pass it along and share it with them.
And also, you can always send your questions and comments to richrelationships.us@gmail.com. This is a weekly podcast, and the new episodes are going to be posted on Monday by 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Remember, you're stronger together.
Let's grow. Hey guys, we forgot to tell you, on February the 2nd, we're having a launch party at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time on Zoom. Please go to our website at richrelationshipsus.com to get the Zoom code. And we're going to be giving away free ebooks to the first 50 people who join us. So come on, we only have 100 spaces. So please come and join us and bring a friend. It's going to be a lot of fun.